Welcome to the Virtual CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping service-based businesses achieve success. Are you a business owner interested in learning how to scale your business? Has your business reached over $1 million in annual revenue? Then this podcast is for you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. Today we have a guest that really needs no introduction. He is all over the internet, all over the accounting world. He's does a lot of speaking, and really, I'm really excited about this guest and to get into this topic. But before we get there, I want to welcome Jody back to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I'm really looking forward to talking with Peter. We met him for the first time at the DCPA just over this last year, and really enjoyed his conversations that he had with the team and the talk that he had. It was pretty enlightening, and I thought this would be a great individual to have on our podcast for sure. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, as Jody mentioned, Peter Margaritis is our guest today, and he's from the Accidental Accountants. So, Peter, do you want to talk a little bit about that name and kind of what you do?
Well, thank you guys for having me on the podcast. I've been looking forward to this a lot. During a performance review, when I used to work at Victoria's Secret Catalog, not as a model, you guys, not as a model, but I appreciate the thought.
I saw Jody's eyes go up.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
I was my cheeks hadn't hit the seat, and my boss looked at me and said, "How in the heck did you ever become a CPA? CPAs can get down here in the numbers. You only get you this far. You're an accidental accountant." And I actually thanked her because that's a nice thing she said to me all year. Yeah, so that's how that name came about. The story's a lot longer, but it gets a little bit boring after a while, so we'll just go with that piece.
Yeah, once you mentioned Victoria's Secret, I think a lot of our listeners got interested, and then it went right up from there. So yeah, I can tell why you're shorting that story. So. All right, so prior to the show, we talked a little bit about, I think that there's a lot of technical language out there, and a lot of times people in fields really, when they public speak or when they're talking to their customers or their clients, they really get caught up in the technical jargon. I think talking to people's intelligence level and really translating stuff to plain English is kind of what one of your strengths is, Peter. So I think that's what we'd like to talk about today, is how to take that technical jargon and really get it so everybody can understand it. So let's start there.
Well, first, I'll speak to any technical profession, whether it's IT, whether it's accounting, whether it's architect, medical, you have a technical language that only you know. For example, my doc called me one Friday afternoon at 4:30, and it was her. That's never good when your doctor calls you. And then she goes, "We got the test results back," and went into this litany of medical lingo. And we were not but maybe 15, 20 seconds. I said, "Doc, stop. Just put it in plain English for me." "Oh, okay. Pete, you might have cancer." "Okay, at least now that I know." But she was able to, but I had to stop her. But a lot of times we think everybody understands that language. I tell accountants, I ask people, what foreign language do you speak? Few people raise their hand, maybe Spanish or Japanese or something. And I go, I asked the question wrong. How many of you speak the foreign language of business called accounting? And they all start laughing. And I go, it's funny, right? But have you ever put somebody to sleep talking to them? Because you can see the deer in the headlights eyes. And they're all doing just exactly what you did, Jamie. Everybody's shaking their head. And it doesn't matter if you're in IT, medical, accounting, or whatever. We have to realize that we speak this technical language riddled with acronyms that when our audience isn't like us, we need to find a way to translate it into plain English so there's understanding.
Yeah, I know one thing. So in my previous life, I was working at a airline company, Frontier Airlines, and I would always tell this to my team. They'd come in and they were trying to explain some error in hedge accounting to me, and they'd spend 5 minutes, and I would just sit there and look at them, and I'd be like, "Okay, you need to explain this to me like I'm my 12-year-old daughter. My 12-year-old daughter needs to understand what you're saying here so we can understand exactly what happened." And again, I'm an accountant, I'm a CPA, and it's just how technical some accountants can get, or even people in other careers can get, it's crippling at times.
I was doing a A&A update in Arizona back in 2013, and one of the things on the docket was consolidations of variable interest entities. And I'm going, oh my God, and I tried to get out of doing it. I said, "You sure you want me to put this in?" She said, "Please, it's on the docket." So the night before, I'm sitting there looking at my slides, riddled with words, riddled with all this. I said, this is going to put. I'm going to be an anesthesiologist. So I said to her, so what are they trying to do? What's really what they're trying to do? They're trying to take something from here and put it over here. And I went, wait a minute, they're trying to move something from here and move it in over here, but over here doesn't want it. Dawned an idea. So the next day when I got to that slide, I saw everybody begin the conference prayer. They immediately grabbed their phones and bowed their head because it's boring. And I said, this is my second or third year here. Let me just play along with me. So I asked everybody in the audience, how many of you are married? All these hands go up. And I go, how many of you have a mother-in-law? And these hands stay up. I said, I want you to think of your mother-in-law as a variable interest entity, and your spouse wants their mother to move into your household permanently. Let me rephrase that. Your spouse wants their mother to consolidate onto your balance sheet. And I just ran with that. And Jamie, I got a really cool last name. Jody, I get a lot of comments on it. But when I go back to Arizona, if anybody was at that conference, you're the mother-in-law guy. That is the best compliment I could get, because I created this fictitious story that was relatable to almost everybody in that room. And somebody asked me, how did you do that? And I went, unbeknownst to me, I was using an improv principle of connect two things that don't seem like they would ever connect to each other and create a story out of it. And I did it. And I was pleasantly surprised that it worked.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy. And again, I've been in so many of those conferences where you look at the topic and you're like, oh boy, I have a CPA talking to me about variable interest entities, and I'm just going to sit in the back and play on my phone or do what I can just to get my CPA on this credit, because there's no way I'm going to be able to follow what this person's talking about. And I think that doing it in presentations is great. And I know, Jody, we do something similar, I think, when we go out and talk to our clients. And I think that's one of the ways we've picked up so many clients.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, just the way that we dress, the way that we talk, the way that we communicate, the way that we listen, a lot of that is important. When we first, when we first got started, I was asked to speak in front of, it was like 30 owners of CPA firms, and really brilliant individuals. They came from all over the United States, some actually from other countries, and I was the lone finance guy on the docket, right? So, and I started off, so it was one of those things. I really prepared a lot. Not really. I didn't prepare at all. I couldn't think of anything, because they said no PowerPoints. Just be yourself. Mostly answer questions. All that kind of stuff. And so I'm like, I just don't know what to talk about. And so then it dawned on me. It's like, well, let me kind of relate and show these folks how to be profitable. And so I got the easel board out, because again, no PowerPoints or anything like that. And I started to write down, first I started off and asked everybody if they could increase, if everybody in the room could increase their pricing by $1, would they lose a client? And everybody kept their hand up. And then I said, now drop your hand as I get further along. And I went $5, hands up, $10, a couple hands went down. I got all the way up to like $50 an hour. And finally I got like 4 or 5 people. So I said, okay, so for $50 an hour, a lot of people in here could raise their prices and still maintain their clients. So I'm like, yeah, sure. Okay, let's keep that in mind. And so then I went through and I said, okay, here's what an individual, and I got my perfect, I'm in front of a bunch of creative agencies, and they really have a really knack of being able to write and draw pictures really well. Well, here I am, an accountant, can't draw, can't at all. And so I start with my stick figures. Actually, it's kind of funny, and I hate to admit this, but I can't even calculate in my head very well. So I actually had one of the people pull out a calculator. And I told him I can't calculate very well, so I'm going to need you to do some calculations for me. So he started with the little stick figure, and I said, one person should work 2,000. Basically I started with 2,080 hours a year, and then I broke it down into basically utilization, average bill rate, what they should charge per hour, and I came down to hey, this person should every person should bill about, it was like $200,000 a year, for an agency. Like, wow, that's pretty cool. And then he multiplied that by 20 people or 30 people, whatever it was, ended up being like 300, a big revenue number. Then I show, hey, here's the profitability. So every person should generate this much profit for it. And I built that out. And so I started the conversation with that everybody in the room or every company should at least maintain 10% of their annualized revenue in the bank at all times, which was, for a $3 million firm, you're looking at $300,000. And I go, how many people, have 10%? And hardly anybody in the room did. I go, well, I'm going to show you how to do that. And so what I did is I said, okay, so let's go ahead and change the average bill rate just by $10. Everybody here said they could do it by $50 and wouldn't hardly lose a client. So $10 shouldn't be a problem. And I did that, and it came up to an extra $300,000 a year. And it was like, wow, it was like really cool. It was like the lights went off, and it was like, boy, this is pretty cool. I could do this just by teaching them how everything should run in a business, and how they can influence that. And basically it came down to the dollar amounts. And so I guess to your point there, it was like, again, taking the very easy thing and making it so that it's very relatable for them to understand. Not once did I say anything about accounting in there at all. It was more like, hey, here's the people, here's how it works, and I called the utilization, average bill rate, sales, their average price, all that kind of stuff. And Twitter just kind of blew up on me. And at that point, I didn't even really know what Twitter was, or I have a good grasp on Twitter. And it was one of those things that they were just twittering away, how great this guy is and how relatable it was and that sort of thing. And that's kind of what got me started, talking to different groups and conferences like that, because it was so fun. First of all, it was fun. It was really educational. It was value added to them by far. And they really took response to it. So it was pretty cool. But again, to your point.
Yeah, I think the stories both of you told, as I was hearing, you guys kind of tell your stories, I think the first thing you did was make it relatable, right? So Peter talking about, okay, who in here is married? And, again, any room you're going to be in, you'd hope at least 75% of the group, is probably going to be married. So that's one relation. And then Jody, obviously bringing it back to something they live and breathe every day, their businesses. And so I think, having that, again, like the analogy you used was too great as well, Peter, where you have like let's disconnect two things that are really far apart from each other, but also something that's relatable to a wide group of the room. And so I think that's also key there.
Yeah, it's how relatable can we make it, and how can we get away from acronyms as well? I mean, Jody, you said DCPA. Is that the Delaware CPA Association, or is that the disorganized CPA? Or it was a digital CPA conference. I did a presentation for the construction department at Target. And in preparation for this, because they were taking two of my books and blending it together, the Improv is No Joke and Take the Number Out of the Numbers, I asked them, for what acronyms do you use? They sent me 8 pages, front and back, of acronyms. And I just started laughing hysterically. And I contacted one of my comedic friends, and I said, hey, help me write something on this. So we created this eye test. And, you look at the eye chart and can you read line 31? And then I just started creating my own titles for these things, just to bring the humor out of it. It's like, this is ridiculous. But all organizations have it, and we speak, and you say SEC, that could be the Southeastern Conference or the Securities and Exchange Commission. It depends on what part of the country you're in. If you're in Alabama, it doesn't matter. It's still the Southeastern Conference. Even when you're talking about the Securities and Exchange Commission. So the more relatable to what they do, and to Jody's point, he's curing a pain point, and he's busting down a wall, because you might have some tire kickers, and as you referred to some folks, that they're just trying to test drive it. But when you can show them in real numbers and talk to them in a relatable way, oh my God, light bulbs just go off. I just start switching on, and there's an emotional attachment there that our brains can handle thousands and tons of data, facts, and figures, but that doesn't drive decision making. Yeah, emotions drive decision making.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I was going to talk about the acronyms a little bit. And I think the funny thing is now that, we work from home, a lot of people are on their computers all the time. Like I was in a meeting the other day and someone mentioned one and I had to Google it. So I was typing the letters and I Google it. It's crazy. Like you said, all the things that come up, especially if an Urban Dictionary link comes up, you're like, oh, okay, I can see what that might mean. But you hope you find the right one so that you can kind of add to the conversation there. So.
I think we could all get better at taking the large words out of the conversation. It's so often that, the acronyms, the large words that maybe people not everybody in the room, not everybody in the room knows or understands. And it's more, I think, more for us to say that we understand. So it's kind of a justification that we understand something. So we use the acronyms. We use the large words. Whereas when you're talking to people, you can't assume that everybody understands, all your big fancy words, right? You kind of have to bring it down to, like I think you had mentioned, Jamie, what your 8th grader or what your 10th grader would understand. That's the I think that's the key to speaking. It's key to writing, definitely. I mean, heck, I could write my books would be boring if they were just talked about, big fancy words and really getting into the dictionary definition. Where when you write a book, or when you do a speech or a talk, or when you're even just talking with a client, I think it's important to try to avoid that as much as possible.
I think it also goes to a lot of someone's ego. Some people like to use big fancy words just to make them sound smarter than they are. Or, look at me, I'm the smartest guy or gal in the room. But they're making it about themselves. They're not making it about the audience. And that's the other piece. This is not about you. You're just a conduit of this vast amounts of information that you need to translate so somebody can actually act on it, versus going, I have no idea what you're talking about at all.
Yeah, and when they hear that big word, their focus just went away, because now they're trying to think, what does that word mean? And here you've talked 3 or 4 different sentences, maybe paragraphs, or you maybe spoke for 5 more minutes, and they're still trying. Their brain is still back there trying to figure out what that meant, and it's a loss of concentration. So I mean, I truly agree with you 100%. The acronyms, they really need to go, and big words really need to be used very limited.
Right. I mean, you think about a non-accountant, when they hear the word depreciation, they think that's the value they lose to their car when they drive off a new car lot. But the accountant will go, no, 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 no. It's a systematic allocation of an asset over time.
Yeah, there's the reason. That's the reason that people avoid us at parties, right? Like, oh, there's the CPA in the room. Like, is this guy going to be like, I don't want to get talking to him about business because it's just going to put me to sleep. But no, I think that even in the interview process and when we're talking to people, especially at the CFO level, that's definitely one of the things I look for. Is, okay, is this person going to come in and be the guy that quotes literature or reads quotes exactly from books or whatever, or is this person going to be someone that's down to earth and can just talk business with me? And like I said, I think those are the people that really are successful in this field that we're in.
Absolutely. I was sharing a story at the conference about a colleague of mine. I referred to she needed an accountant. I referred to an accounting firm, and it was a rough go at first because she didn't. She's brilliant at what she does, but she doesn't do accounting. She does the real stuff, coaches, executive coaching, all that heavy lifting stuff. And we had talked about it, said, give them some time, work through it, and then about 10 months into the project, she called me crying. Well, what are you doing crying? What's the matter? I just got off of a virtual meeting with my CPA firm. I didn't understand a word they said. They made me feel stupid. Not their intent, but that was the realization. And they put the spreadsheet on the screen. And she goes, it felt like there was like 300 columns and 800 rows on this thing. And they were just talking right through this. I almost had to get like an air sick bag. So actually, she convinced me to be her virtual or fractional CFO and be the translator between the firm and her, so she has an understanding of the business now. And I've talked to the firm a little bit about this. I go, here's what I heard: we're trying, but we're just so busy sometimes we can't. And I bit my tongue. I bit my tongue and said, that's not good enough. And same thing with IT, same thing with all these technical professions. We have to take the time, make the time, and find a charge code. Like I'm translating IT into English. I'm developing an app for that, or I'm developing the accounting to English app, and spend time on trying to figure out ways of translating.
I think the first point there is great. So I think for our listeners, if you are working with a CPA firm and you don't look forward to the financial statement meeting, and you know that it's going to be like a 30-minute nap or a 45-minute nap, then, get someone else, get someone that can translate for you, because financials are too important to be that boring, and I think that's, when I train our internal CFOs, I tell them all the time, I'm like, okay, don't go page by page, word by word. No one wants to hear that. Like, call out the highlights and then make it relatable. Let's talk about their business. Let's talk about the future, because that's what the people want to listen to. So I think definitely for our listeners, like, again, if you're listening to a financial statement meeting and you don't want to be there, then it might be time to find someone that can translate for you.
Yeah, or if you just simply get the financial statements and have no idea how to read them, seek out somebody that can translate, like Peter done.
I interviewed this woman who's a managing partner of a firm in Iowa, and she gets it. I mean, she goes, we actually try to teach our small business owners about what we do, but we don't use the words and stuff. And what they do in their financial meetings is they record them and they send it to them. And it's like a 10-minute, and they're just hitting on the highlights, and send it to them, because they might not be able to spend an hour with them or so at 2:00 in the afternoon, but they can watch it at night or first thing in the morning. If they have questions, they call them. But I thought that was a brilliant idea on their part.
Yeah, no, my favorite financial meetings I've ever had are ones where I talk for like 2 minutes, and then whatever I said brought up a question, and we go completely different direction of what I thought we were going to talk about, and we're in that meeting and an hour's up already. I'm like, oh wow, we just talked for an hour about something I had no idea we would talk about, but the one thing I said in the beginning triggered this question that got us down this road. Like, again, some people would be like terrified by that. Like, I had this whole agenda, I had all these things I wanted to talk about, and I didn't get to any of them. But that to me is the best financial statement meeting, is where you actually hit a topic and you just keep going into it, because that's what they're interested in.
Absolutely.
Great. So let's turn the corner here a little bit, and let's talk about, again, we talked a lot about in the CPA front, and let's talk about for other industries and other languages. And so where is this important? Again, I think we've talked about the public speaking part, but let's talk about like the sales side of things and how important it is to have the communication and the good language when it comes to sales when you're in a very technical industry. So, Jen, I'm gonna let you talk about this a little bit to start off.
Yeah, with our sales process, it's fairly a simple process. It's an hour-long process. A lot of times it doesn't even go that long. And with that, the first thing we're doing is we're trying to figure out, why are they here? Why are they sitting in front of us? Why? Because we didn't go out and drag them into the sales call. They came to us, and so it's important to figure out, hey, what issues do we need to solve, or where are the kinks in the armor, what they currently have, and asking tons of just leading questions. Just basically start, hey, so how can I help you, and it kind of rolls into that, and then from there breaking it down even simpler, and then presenting to them a very easy way to price the program. Like with ours, we have a pricing calculator. We just pop right up, and it's like Carvana. You click on what you like and don't like, and boom, you've got a price. And it is what it is. It's not like Carvana. You go back and say, "Can I get a better price?" That is the price, and that's how we use our calculator. And clients love it, because even we only close. I say we only close about 40% of our leads, which I think is pretty solid. But I'd say 100% of the people that go through the process, we get a compliment. It's like, hey, that was pretty cool. I appreciate that. It was real straightforward, real easy. I wish other people did this, and other, and it just made the process so simple for them that they could make an informed decision right there. And I'd say probably out of that, we probably get 5 to 10% of the clients that we close are ready to sign on the dotted line that day, after that conversation. And it's kind of amazing, because our average price is about $70,000 for a new, to do our service. And it goes from like 30 to 100 $150,000, $200,000, but the average is around 70. And, that's a lot of money to, within an hour, someone make that decision. And it happens again 40% of the time, because again, it's more of a conversation. It's not, there's no, we don't talk accounting at all. We talk about, how we can help them out, and basically answer the questions and problems that they might have. And so again, making it very easy for them to make that decision is important.
And I think there too, and Peter, I'm going to throw this over to you, is I think we've all been in those sales calls where, and I think you used the word showing off earlier, Peter, but like the person's trying to show off their knowledge to you. Like, and you're thinking of, okay, we're going to add this new process, or we're going to add this new application to our system. And they're trying to explain the ins and outs of how it works and doing like a demonstration for you. And you're just like, wow, this is way too technical for me. And I think this is really where you can help out with this question, Peter, is in this sales process, how do you translate it and relate it to the client so that way they're not just bored with the technical jargon of it?
CPAs and technical people, they like to give all the information to them down to the nano piece. And it's just this flood of numbers and words and data and facts and figures and data and facts and figures. And really, what's the three most important things of the sales call? One, we're trying to cure a pain point. So let's figure out what that pain point is. And two, then how do we put it in place? But I was talking to a firm not too long ago, and they said we had this one gentleman, and the guy's brilliant, technically sound. He's a tax code head. He's a code head.
Yep.
And we as a firm had to make a decision because we would never put him in front of a client or do a presentation. So we had to make a decision on, do we keep him or do we tell him, you've gone as far as you can, time to go someplace else? And they realized he brought value, but they weren't going to put him in front of clients. And it's the same thing. Are we putting the right people in front of the client when we're on a sales call? And how much, sales training do they actually have? A buddy of mine was a pharmaceutical sales rep. He just recently retired. And he likes to remind me of it every time he calls me. He's retired. And he said pharmaceutical sales is very strict, very structured. And he'd come in with his iPad and his slides and stuff. And one of the last sales call he made, he walked in the doctor's office, and I forgot what drug he was doing at the time. And he told the doctor all of the side effects related to this drug. And it wasn't just a few. I mean, it was a
every one of them.
Yeah, pretty much every one. And the doc says, well, why would I want to write this script? And then he said, well, here's the benefits. And just went on about the benefits of it, flipped that sales call. And guess what? Who's writing scripts now? The guy made Champions Club 3 consecutive years in a row because he knew how to sell, because he would also do something else. He would listen.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times in sales meetings, we're not listening because we've already scripted this thing out in our head. And this is where we need to go off script. We're prepared, but then you walk into that room and you wad that script up and you throw it away, and you listen to what the person is asking for, telling you, and you react in that manner, not the way you've scripted it out. Goes a long way. But a lot of times we're not listening because, okay, if he says this, I'm going to do this way. Or this is going to happen, or I need to follow this flow chart. No, throw it all away and just be as authentic as you can, be as good listener as you can, and ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, I've been in those sales processes before where, they asked me a question. I spent 7-8 minutes answering it, and then the next question seems like it's coming from left field. Like I just gave them 7 minutes of information about my company, about what we do, and then the next question is just like totally random, totally scripted. You're like, okay, you must have not just listened to a word I said. I just gave you a bunch of ammo to go with, and you didn't take any of it. So yeah, it just doesn't feel good, that someone's not listening to you. So.
Well, how many times have we been, even outside of the sales process, go into a financial statement presentation or a strategy meeting or whatever, having this great spreadsheet or whatever the presentation is, and all of a sudden, you're asking, like, hey, what's going on? And it goes a completely different direction. And you never even talk about the spreadsheet you spent hours on. You may have mentioned it or said one point, but you never really got into it. And a lot of the CPAs they're so defensive, or they're so proud of it, or there's something there that will steer them back to that spreadsheet. And the client doesn't really care about the spreadsheet, at all. They cared about something that they were trying to explain to you or tell you, or the issue that they had. And, I guess the listening part is the huge part, because you can be prepared in a sales presentation. You can be overly prepared on a financial statement presentation, but by listening, it could go a completely different direction, and you've got to take it that direction. You want to take it the way that the client or the prospect is leaning towards.
I got a question for you. Do you think in those situations where Jamie's describing, gave him 7 minutes worth of primo material, they didn't even take that in, makes me think that they really don't know their client. They might know them from their financial statement, but they've never been inside the building. They've never watched how the flow stuff comes in, gets churned, and goes out. They just see it on a financial statement related to the numbers. They have no operational knowledge of the business. And I think that's where another big breakdown is how well do you know your client, your customer, and how well do you know their internal processes and procedures that you can step away from the financial statement or make it more relatable by going, well, you remember we had that huge snowstorm and we couldn't get stuff in the building. That's why things were running behind. That's why this is that versus you're down 20% in profitability.
I love the accounting voice, by the way. Sounds so familiar. No, I think to the point there too as well. I think the other part of that is I think a lot of people, and again, I know when I work with our CFOs, especially when they first start, is you are looking at your calendar of like, okay, I got to survive this day, right? Okay, I have 4 meetings today. I have 4 financial statement meetings. I just got to get through them. And so you're just, okay, the meetings, we're 20 minutes in. Okay, I got to just move to the next point as opposed to, okay, I'm going to go into this meeting and add value and listen and really just have a conversation with someone. And once you get to that point, it takes a lot of the pressure off, to Jody's point. Like, again, I know it's frustrating when you spend 3 hours preparing for a meeting and you put all these pretty spreadsheets together and they don't get used. But at the end of the day, if that's what the client's looking for, that meeting ends up going a lot easier. And that prep you did, that 3 hours of prep that you did building something else, also had you in the right state of mind where you can easily pivot. And so I think that's the key there. So I think, yeah, to that point, yeah, it's just about, don't just go through your day, don't just like take things off your list, like go into those meetings being invested and being ready to talk. And I think it's key there.
Yeah. And Peter, you made a great point. How well do you know your client? When you're a brick and mortar, when you can actually physically walk into their location, or if you're in the same city and you know that there's that snowstorm or whatever that might be, how would you do that in a remote environment where really a lot of times you don't ever shake hands with the client? You don't ever visit their factory or their place of employment or really get to meet their team on a personal basis like you would on a brick and mortar type of thing. One thing I would say is, and I'd like to get your thought on it as well, is that when we go through financials, when we go through the numbers, instead of just assuming, hey, labor's down 24%, blah, 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 we just ask simple questions. Why do you think that happened? What happened in last month that could have caused that to happen? And boom, the client then starts getting more involved in the discussion. And because of the snowstorm, we had that. Oh, that makes sense. I heard about that. And then you can kind of relate more into it. So in a distributed world, the way that we get around that is we ask questions. We don't assume that we know the answer to everything, and I think that should be the way in any situation. But by asking those questions all the time, making yourself vulnerable, the client really feeds into that, and they really helps them solve their own problems a lot of times. How do you go about what other recommendations would you make outside of asking questions?
Well, I think that's key to asking questions because tell me about your business. A lot of times somebody will come up to me and say, "So, what do you do?" I said, "Tell me about what you do first." And what entrepreneur doesn't like to talk about their business? Yeah. So you flip that, and then they're giving you all this information up front, so you're starting to learn about their business. We're asking questions, but I think maybe even taken to another level. Depends on how many different departments that they have. I think the one thing I wanted to talk to is the head of sales and find out what that sales process is and what does that pipeline look like and how has it been and get more information from that aspect and then hit distribution and find out talk to the head of distribution. What challenges do they run into? What issues do they have? Is there, we can sort of tell from the financial statements if their equipment might be a little bit older than normal, and maybe they need to get some new equipment. But just if we can get access to the heads of those departments, to just have maybe a 15, 30-minute conversation with them, just so we learn a little bit more about their business, I think goes a long way in being that, trusted business advisor that the AICPA has been taunting for years and years and years. However, I'll probably never get another AICPA job again, but they're working more on the trusted financial advisor versus the business advisor. The business advisor understands what goes on in HR, sales, distribution, customer service, all those areas, not just the financial statements.
Yeah, and what we always tell our CPAs too is, the financial statements are the language of business. So once you understand that, it's not too hard to translate to any other area. So yeah, I think it's a great point. So we're actually right on time here. So I wanted to make sure we could wrap this up. But I think we've done a really nice job kind of hitting on the three sides of the triangle of really relatability. I think the one is obviously with public speaking, the two is in sales, and I think three is with existing customers, especially when you're in the service side. So I think we've done a nice job covering those things. But I want to give each of you guys a second for a last thought here. So we'll start with our guest, Peter. You could go first. What's your last thought?
If you're in a technical profession, think about how you can translate it to the language of your client in a way that they can understand and act on. And don't just be a data dump. Find the emotion there. That helps in decision making. Like Jody showing, well, here's the emotion. If you just add $10, look what could happen here. Now that's a fact. That's a pain point, but that's also $10. We have an emotional attraction towards money, right?
Yep.
That drives a lot of us. So make sure you bring emotion into that conversation.
Great. What about you, Jody? Final thoughts?
I would say, with emotion is what drives everything. I mean, it drives, like you mentioned, the sales process. It drives how well you're relatable to clients. Clients like you, clients trust you, all that kind of stuff. But I'd also, I can't overemphasize just being down to earth and being, don't talk over the client. I mean, that does nothing. Like you mentioned the doctor scenario. The doctor didn't mean anything about it. I mean, probably didn't even realize that she was doing it,
right,
and
right.
was end up doing it. And then all of a sudden, there's that disconnect. And we as accountants do it all the time. Lawyers do it all the time. Engineers do it all. We all professions do it all the time, and we don't have to pound our chest and act like we're the smartest and best person ever. Just be down to earth and talk to people on their level, and it goes so far. And the conversation is much more enjoyable, they're much more understandable, and very relatable. And I think that's really the key to public speaking, and it's the key that we use when we teach our CFOs that, hey, don't talk accounting. Nobody wants to hear accounting. Talk about their business. What drives their business? How many trucks do they need to put through in order to get the revenue they need to have? No one can just magically increase your revenue next year by 10%. What does it take to do that? It takes 20 widgets a month, and you can kind of break it down to where they can relate and control. And I think that's really key to everything, is just make everything relatable.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, well, definitely appreciate both you, Peter, and Jody. I think this was a great show, and it might be one that I'll listen to after the fact. We talked about that a little earlier, so yeah, appreciate you guys.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. This was great.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving business success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.